This is a story from this Callahan's Cross Time Saloon. It's a real short story. It's a good one. It's called Just Dessert. Sooner or later, just about every bar acquires that most obnoxious nonsense, the practical joker. I'd have thought Callahan's place would be immune to that particular kind of carbuncle. We don't seem to pick up the standard idiots that most saloons have to put up with. The weepy drunks and the belligerent loudmouths and the ones who drink to get stupider. It's almost as though some sort of protective spell ensues that ensures that only the people who find Callahan's are the ones who should and the ones who must. But very occasionally, some refugee from the Dewdrop Inn does an accidental wander in, usually just long enough to make us appreciate his absence with his final leaves. There was, for instance, the guy of an ethnic extraction I can't specifically put my finger on, without getting a lot of Italians mad at me. We who represented a jukebox concern. He had made Callahan an offer he couldn't refuse, so Mike didn't bother refusing. The guy's broken arms eventually healed, I understand, but he never got over that amnesia. Then there was the gent who brought his young secretary in to get her drunk for carnal purposes. Callahan got a little sloppy that night. Somehow all the ginger ale ended up in her glass and all the vodka in his. When he woke up, he was a far piece from nowhere, minus a securely and rather sportedly pair of pants. When the practical joker arrived, however, it was not Callahan, but Doc Webster who fixed his wagon. It was Friday night, and the place was more crowded than Dollar Day in a cat house. Fast Eddie was sharing his piano bench with three other guys. Callahan and Tom Hupston were behind the bar. Boozier than a midget mountain climber, and we were all plumb out of beer nuts. Me, I was sandwiched between Doc Webster and Noah Gonzel at the bar, feeling the urgency of the hydraulic pressure, wishing there wasn't a wall of folks between me and the Jake. I guess it was the huge number of cars scattered around and out in the parking lot that made the sadistic jackasses think he'd found a perfect place to pull off his little gag. Come to think of it, maybe fate was leading him to Callahan's after all. In any case, he come shouldering through the throng with his two buddies on either side of him, and at about 11, and the three of them took up position at the bar just beside the dock. I noticed them out of the corner of my eye and gaped like a fish with his jaw open. The guy in the middle was plainly and simply the ugliest man I had ever seen. When they passed out necks, he thought they said sex and asked for lots and lots and lots. His chin and his Adam's apple looked like twin brothers in bunk beds. His nose appeared to be sideways and his eyes were different sizes. His ears were so predominant that from the front door he looked like a taxicab coming down the street with the doors open, and his hair resembled a lawn of crabgrass. The longest strands issued from his nostrils, and so this guy basically looked like you, Dad. As he reached the bar, the clock over the cash box stopped, and I couldn't blame it. I forgot about my bladder and just gulped down my drink I had been nursing. The doc saw my face, swirled his massive bulk around to look, and damn near dropped his scotch. You have to understand that the doc firmly believes in the Irish legend that on Judgment Day you will be suspended head down in a barrel containing all the liquor you've ever spilt. And you down if you drowned, to hell with you. Even Callahan shuddered. The guy glanced at the perfectly ordinary looking accomplices on either side of him and pulled a fistful of singles from his pocket of his sports coat and said, "Boilermakers." The noise of the crowd had begun to abate, and as folks caught sight of the apparition, the ugly man, and the single word was plainly audible. Callahan's cigar traveled from one side of his mouth to the other. He shrugged his broad shoulders and produced 3 shot glasses and 3 chasers, unable to take his eyes off the guy in the middle. The 3 of them lifted their shots, upended them, and then did the same with the beers. "Again," said the ugly man, and Callahan refilled their glasses. The second round went down, if anything, faster than the first. "Again," he says. Callahan blinked, shrugged again, and made 3 more Boilermakers. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Now, even in Callahan's place on a Friday night, amid some of the most decadent drinkers that ever tried to outdo a sponge, the sort of thing is bound to attract some attention. The silence was nearly complete. Some of the boys in the far corners began climbing on top of the tables and chairs to watch, and there was enough necks being craned to make the chiropractor dizzy with glee. Over at the piano, Fast Eddie began a pool, taking bets on how many more rounds the 3 strangers could survive. After the 6th set of Boilermakers had been made and upended, Callahan tried to call a halt. "Sorry, gents. If you want to commit suicide, you're going to have to find another place to do it." The 2 flankers nodded, but the ugly man reached into his sports coat pocket again and produced chopsticks and balanced them on his index finger. "Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers," he said clearly and distinctly. "The Length police dismissed Seth as Sister Susan Swang's shirts for sailors." He kept it up until Callahan exchanged looks with the Doc Webster, put another shot in front of him. The guy shut up, gulped the sauce, and set the glass of beer after it, waiting in expectation. Callahan sighed and opened up a fresh bottle, and I could tell from the label that it was the colored water Tom Hampton drinks when he's working, explaining to everyone who'll listen that the wages of gin are breath. I guess the big barkeep figured this ugly mug was too far drunk to notice the switch. So he switched it up with some water on the guy.
So he's not doing shots.
He's going to try to switch it up on him, right? But as he reached out to pour, the unloving customer put his hand over the glass. "Wait a bit," he said faintly, his voice suddenly wavering. I don't know. Maybe, oh Lord, I don't feel too good. I think I'm gonna." He clutched his middle and leaned over the bar, and a ghastly mess splattered on the countertop. A great disgust and groan went up, and those of us boys with weak stomachs began to make their way to the wood door. But the real stampede began when the helpless stranger's 2 companions, grinningly, wildly, produced a pair of spoons and dug in. That reminds me of Crazy Wayne, huh? That's why I wanted to read this story to you. I would have bet I would have bet my store teeth that nothing short of an earthquake could empty out Callahan's place on a Friday night, but that about did it. Folks fled in all directions, out the front door and out the back door, and even the windows with horror on their faces, and the hideous gurgling cries faded into the night. When the smoke had cleared and the uh, commotion ceased, Callahan and the doc and I were the only survivors. And even the inaudible Callahan looked green about the gills. Tom Tom was out cold on the floor behind the bar. And that damned practical joker and his two cronies turned around, looked at the empty saloon, and began laughing hard enough to burst a gut, slapping their thighs and punching each other on the shoulders. "What the hell?" I began, and the ugly man, looking fully recovered now, turned to face me, still laughing to fit to kill. He pulled open his sports coat and disclosed a hot water bottle pinned over the inside of his pocket with beef stew. He gasped, and his pals began laughing even louder. Callahan went from pale green to bright red.
So it wasn't puke. He had a water bottle with beef stew in it.
Yep.
And when he bent over, he squirted it.
Yep. Hand went under the bar. That's where Callahan keeps his shotgun. Emerging with a softball bat this time. "No, Mike," I cried. "Don't. I know how you feel, but there's just a wild chance that some jury somewhere in this world might convict you." Muscles bulged in his jaw, but he got a grip on himself and lowered the bat. The three waterheads kept on laughing obliviously. "All right, God damn it," Callahan said as he bellowed. "You've had your fun. Now get the rest of your crap and get it off my bar and get out before I murder yez." And I was startled to notice that Doc was grinning broadly. It didn't figure to be his kind of humor. The three wits, sensing danger at last, nodded and began spooning up the remains of the stew. In no time, the bar top was reasonably clean. The ugly joker offered Callahan a 10 spot for his trouble, and he nearly had it for dessert. Still smiling idiotically, they headed for the door and disparted into the night. Callahan caught sight of Doc's grin and glared at him, still furious. "What the hell are you laughing at?" He growled at Doc's grin Doc's grin got even wider. Doc said, "I saw that gag pulled once before, Mike," he said, "and I recognized it right off." "So that makes it funny?" the doc said. Or Callahan said. "Hell no." "Well then?" "That guy's stomach must be pretty good to handle all that booze," the doc said hippily. "But I wonder how he and his buddies are going to do. I wonder how him and his buddies are going to like that seasoning I put in the stew while their backs were turned." The doc opened his pudgy fist, and there was a little bottle labeled Serum of Ipecac. Callahan's eyes widened, and then he smiled too. So that was called Just Dessert from Callahan's Crosstime Saloon.